again, everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I am John, and as always, thank you so much for being here. Good topic, let's do it. What's some scary shit that you've experienced? Part 2. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. I had my first ever seizure while driving and crashed into a tree about 100 feet, 30.4 meters before a bridge. The doctors found a mass on my brain that kept bleeding and had to be cut out. I fully recovered, glad to be alive. Had my neck broke. Thought I would be totally disabled at first. Couldn't barely feel anything at first. I thankfully recovered most and can walk and do most things, but yeah, that was terrifying. About 9 years ago, I had surgery to replace an ICD defibrillator device in the event my heart stopped beating again. During the surgery, the team discovered I have a genetic condition that makes anesthetic significantly less or entirely ineffective. I told the surgeon I felt the initial incision, and he said a little discomfort was normal. Cut to a few steps later, where I was in excruciating pain. The meds were now maxed out. I was given two choices: wait for another team of anesthesiologists and doctors to put me under general anesthesia, 60 plus minutes, or continue with the surgery. Entirely aware and feeling everything. In my mental state, the idea of laying fully awake, unable to move, riled with anxiety, was not an option, so we pressed on. The screen above the operating table showed the doctors carefully feeding a new lead through my arteries until they reached my heart. I was calmly told the next step was to screw the lead into my heart. I will never forget the feeling after the 3, 2, 1 countdown of a cold piece of metal being turned into my heart tissue like it was nothing. Once the screw and lead were in the device, had to be tested and programmed like several people's hands inside of you, wandering around and touching things they shouldn't. Tested the device with a mini shock, which didn't at all feel small, and then stitched me back up and sent me on my way. The sound of heart monitors and clinically sterile environment of a hospital or doctor's offices still trigger my PTSD from the events. Well, that is absolutely terrifying and graphic and descriptive and awesome all at the same time. I was trafficked when I was younger, early 20s to when I was 30, and my trafficker tried to kill me when I was too old to be valuable anymore. Beat me in the head with an iron bar. I think the only reason this didn't scare the ever-living F out of me was because I was too dead dog tired to really process it properly at the time. I was in university, and it had reached the point in the semester where it was major crunch time. I had 3 major term assignments due, plus weekly assignments for 4 different classes. Day 1. Woke up at 6:30 a.m. so that I could get to the university in time for my 8:30 a.m. class. After classes were done for the day, I met with my group on the major term assignments. It was the same people for all the term assignments, so we could do all 3 simultaneously. We worked on it until the common room closed down at 10 p.m. Then we went home. I ate supper and went straight to bed at 11 p.m. I woke bolt upright at about 12 a.m. because I realized there was a mistake in the major term assignment we'd been working on, and it needed to be fixed, as that assignment was due that morning, day 2. So I woke up, worked on it until 6 a.m., and then made my way back to the university. I downed an obscene amount of coffee and energy drinks so I could make it to the end of classes. After class, I met up with the same group of people, and we kept working on the group assignments. At this point, it was about 6 p.m. For those keeping track at home, that means I had slept 1 hour in the past 35 and a half hours. All of a sudden, my entire body went cold, like right down to the bones kind of cold. I said to the people I was working with, one male and one female, that I very suddenly felt very cold and that I was kind of concerned. The woman in my group said, maybe go walk outside for a bit, get your blood flowing and get some sun. It was very warm out that day, and that seemed like a reasonable idea. So I started walking towards the main quad in our university. The final classes of the day had just ended, so there were a ton of people milling around. mostly heading to the transit stop to head home. As I walked, I was kind of absent-mindedly people watching. Then all of a sudden, everybody's faces around me glitched and went blank. And I'm not talking like they had a blank expression on their faces. I'm talking all of their features were gone, and they just had a blank face. They still had their hair, but that was it. They just kept walking as they had been. Nothing else changed. They just didn't have faces anymore. And then their faces glitched back, but it wasn't their actual faces. When their features came back, they all looked the exact same. All the women looked exactly like the woman from my study group who had told me to go for a walk. All the men looked exactly like my brother. This caused me to freak out a bit. I wasn't scared, I was more confused and thinking something like, what the F was that about? And so I decided that I needed to sleep. So I made a beeline for the university library, went to one of the upper floors where they have comfy chairs and it's not so busy. I collapsed in the chair and fell asleep almost immediately. I completely blanked out and didn't wake up until the janitor came along and shook my foot to wake me. He told me the library was closing and that I needed to go down to the ground floor where they stayed open all night. I looked at my phone and it was nearly midnight, so I'd slept for about 6 hours. I had multiple missed calls and text messages from my group members, the last of which was the male group member saying, "Hey, so it doesn't seem like you're coming back, so I'll just take your backpack and books home with me and give it to you tomorrow." You know, sometimes our sleep patterns get out of whack and we just suck it up or tough it out or use caffeine or whatever to get you through, but it is really important. I'm just as guilty, so let's get some more sleep. This was pretty recent, but I was honestly more confused. I was on my way back to work early in the morning. As I'm driving, some guy is walking in the street. He saw my car and got back on the sidewalk. About 5 seconds after, he pulls out a gun and starts just kind of waving it, looking right at me. I just kept going, but I was honestly worried he might try and put one in my car. I thought there was no way I was about to hit him because it took about 5 full seconds to get to about where he was in the street, and I was going about 40 miles per hour. I've been thinking about it off and on ever since, trying to figure out what kind of logic was going through his head. When I was about 9 years old, it was like 8:03 p.m. at the time. Keep in mind, I went to bed at 7:30 at the time. I was trying to sleep, but then right in my ear I hear my name, like as if somebody whispered to me. At first I rolled over to see if it was my brother sleepwalking. We shared a bunk bed. But when I rolled over, nobody was there. Brother still sleeping on top. I'm not insane, but I swear it was a real whisper. Never happened again after that, but it still haunts me to this day, still wondering what it was. I'm a private pilot. A co-owner of a plane we shared, small Cessna, emailed me to see if I could sit right seat for him this Saturday, as he hadn't been up in a while and needed some practice, and wanted another pilot up front. My wife was doing a marathon that weekend, and we were out of town, but I told him I'd go up with him the following week when I got back. My phone rang that Saturday night. It was another pilot I had flown with the week before. He let out a sigh of relief and said, "Oh, thank God it wasn't you." The other guy who wanted me to fly with him had taken his parents up for a flight instead. They stalled on approach to land back at our airport and spun into the ocean, killing all 3 of them. I was like 8 years old, was in school, and choked on a little toy. I couldn't breathe, so I asked my friend to help me, but she didn't understand me since I couldn't speak and only made incoherent noises. I ran to my teacher, who was helping other kids with their homework, and grabbed my neck with my hands. She immediately understood what was happening and did the Heimlich maneuver on me. The next day, my whole body ached, but I was alive and well. The teacher told me that her daughter was a doctor and had taught her to do the maneuver, and this was the first time she had to do it. She told me that she was very nervous because she saw my face totally purple, and she knew that if she delayed I could have died. God bless her. She literally saved my life. I will never forget the feeling of desperation. To be honest, when I see someone I know get slashed with a knife when we were out drinking, that shit was absolutely awful to see. I felt sick watching someone I know getting their hand sliced up. It was like where your pinky is, and then you have that spare skin beside it. It was literally folded over like salami. Where I live, it is common for someone to get bottle stabbed or slashed. I heard of it, but I never saw it until a couple of months ago. It was sickening to see that. The knife he got slashed with was like this big adventure knife. Basically, it wasn't a machete, but it was a Rambo, absolutely terrifying to see it. Last year, in my another school, it was lunchtime, and I walked to the bathroom. There were a bunch of guys from 9th or 8th grade and a boy from 6th. The boy gave one of them an effing pistol. The guy took it and put it in his pants. I saw that shit through the mirror, left the bathroom silently, and effing and shivering, I warned the employees I could see, and mainly the vice principal. Most of the time, I was trying to keep my brother far away from the effing bathroom. A bit later, the vice principal caught them, and turns out the gun was a toy. Boy, the pistol was identical to a real one. Was snowboarding on what was generally considered to be an easy run, but the trail was narrow, icy, and had some meandering switchbacks and some ruts due to the volume of people that had gone down. The left side of the run was lined with rocks and trees. With how the sun was angled, I didn't notice a small piece of ice that was slightly raised above the snow. I ended up catching an edge on the raised ice and going headfirst off the hill, essentially plummeting around 30 feet. I thought that was the end, but somehow I ended up missing all the trees and rocks and landed in a huge pile of snow. A kind skier that saw me fall made his way down to help me back onto the main run. After he helped me up, I took the gondola down and called it a day. That was the scariest shit I've experienced. When I was 9, my father tried to murder my mom while my then 8-year-old brother and I were in the other room watching Scooby-Doo. I heard her scream for help and ran to see why. I saw him on top of her and strangling her. He saw me, got up, and slammed the door on my thumb. I cried as loud as I could, and that seemed to be enough to stop him. Probably because the neighbors could hear me screaming. He opened the door again and ran outside to his truck. My mom told me like 15 years later that he went outside to look for a gun he borrowed, but was too drunk to find it. He came back inside freaking out and eventually told my brother he had to call the police. He was 8 and froze, so my father started screaming at him for not doing it and called himself to turn himself in. I started having an asthma attack due to the stress of the situation, and he tried to get to me. My mom got in between us and refused to let him near me. He was 5'11" and 200 pounds, while my mom was 5'3" and less than 120. Eventually, the cops got there with an ambulance and arrested him. They searched the truck and found the gun in the glove compartment. My mom left him for good that day. He decided to fight for custody once he was out on bail. He got supervised visitation instead. I had to continue seeing him for 2 years until he stopped coming by because he got really hard into drugs after his mother died. I was 32 before I could watch Scooby-Doo again without having flashbacks. We'd helped. Sorry you went through that, and it's terrible. Hope you guys are alright. Sat in a car with some old guy I knew while he bragged to his mate about smashing a man and his wife's head in with a hammer over a drug dispute. I was aware of his past, but not to that extent. On the one hand, I appreciate him revealing that for my own safety, so I could disassociate from him. But at the same time, the way he was nonchalantly bragging about potentially committing homicide was unsettling and made my stomach jump a bit. I also don't think his friend was very impressed either, but we were both just sort of going along with what he was saying. For some context, he was a family friend, 40 years older than myself. Got hit by a car as a pedestrian and broke my femur at 14 years old. Went into shock and lost vision for a good 45 seconds, so I wasn't sure I was in one piece and gonna survive. Either that or was the officiant at my sister's wedding. I prepared a speech, which he had printed up on a special sheet with designs on the back to make it look a bit more official. I was handed a folded up sheet just before the ceremony had started and assumed it was my speech. Yeah, it wasn't. It was my brother-in-law's vows. I opened it up and realized that just as everyone was finally seated, I had to casually whisper to him that I effed up royally, and he quickly walked away to grab the speech from my sister. When he walked away, I wasn't sure whether she would actually have the speech or not. Thought maybe I had misunderstood that she was going to provide a printed version that day. I already have terrible social anxiety, and in the couple minutes standing there waiting, I felt a rush of fear I'd never felt in my life. I thought I was going to have to make that shit up on the spot. Pretty sure I almost passed out. They also had special instructions for the ceremony. I had to follow directly, so there was really no way to wing it properly. He came back with it, and we resumed, but man, I wanted to die at that point. I'm really glad I didn't F their wedding speech up. Sheesh, I drank heavily after that.